Just before Christmas, I basically decided like I need to make my follow-up. And the follow-up was basically about the interrogations. Little did I know that it was going to be this big. We're talking about, at this point, about 40 odd people that were involved in this. I started working on it early last year, and then I went into the hospital. And when I went into the hospital, it was the only thing I was doing. I didn't even watch movies. I was in hospital for about 80 days with 11 operations and a lot of aftercare I've got as well. So a week after I got out, I decided to release it, which wasn't a smart move because I've been on heroic dosages of opioids for about 3 months. And although I came out all right, afterwards I was like, well, this resembles Swiss cheese, it needs more work, this, that, and the other. What I released is about 308 pages, which is more than double than what I did on the second floor lunchroom encounter. And since that period, I basically added 80 pages on. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you a loose talk of where I'm at right now, what I've seen, what I've read, etc., etc. We'll have a few videos, especially in the second hour, Oswald in the corridor and so forth. I basically try to collect everything that's available and stuff that I've been given by others as well, and try to turn it into some sort of a coherent story. I'm hungover, so okay. We're talking about the third floor of Oswald's interrogations. Now, Oswald was roughly incarcerated from about 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday the 22nd till about 10:30 on Sunday morning. Well, I'm going to show you footage of all that in a moment. But first of all, I want to just paint you a picture of what this whole thing looks like. Now, as you can see, this is the third floor plan, and in this map, you see here in the bottom quadrant, this southeastern quadrant, you see Homicide Robbery Bureau. That's basically the domain of Wolf Fritz and Robbery and Homicide. Inside that Robbery and Homicide Bureau, you see over there, you see Captain Fritz. That's where Oswald was basically dropped off in every time he was going to be interrogated. The interrogations itself were done by Captain Fritz, and there were others available, present as well. I'll get into that in a second. Just going to give you some still shots about the actual situation inside. The good thing about this picture, for instance, is I'm going to throw loads of names out, and at some point you'll start to go, oh yeah, I'll get it, I'll get it. This is, believe it or not, this is James Bookhouse. This is an FBI agent who was present in the interrogation room for almost all the sessions as such. He was there together with James Hosty. Hosty was only there for the first session. Then after that, because he screwed up royally, and I mean royally, he was basically pulled back and given different errands to run. Whereas actually, Hosty held Oswald's file, and Bookhouse was just a liaison between the FBI and the police as such. Well, of course, there's pandemonium outside because, of course, there are many, many, many people inside the corridors. Here's a collage. I'm just going to go through this really quick. Yeah, there are dozens. Some people say 300. I think that's a bit rich. But I'd say like up to 100 people were definitely in that corridor. Take a look here on the left while Oswald's going through the corridor. He's basically being mocked. The good thing about this is that there's tons of material. It's unbelievable how many pictures and how much film footage there is. Now, some of it you see in these documentaries and such. It's okay, but the problem with these documentaries is that they don't really timeline anything of it. They just whack it in there like show Oswald in the corridor, bang, that's it. Whether it's the 22nd or the 23rd, it doesn't matter. The good thing about this project is that you easily distinguish what's the 22nd and what's the 23rd. After the press conference, Oswald had to give his shirt to the FBI when it was flown to Washington and such. Basically what happened then is he was walking around in his t-shirt. So all the footage and the pictures that you see of him walking around in a white t-shirt are from the 23rd. Everything wearing him with his white t-shirt and his shirt one off his shoulders, like here, as you can see here in the center over there, is basically everything's from the 22nd. And on the 24th, he basically started wearing a black sweater and we got snuffed by ribbon and such. Right. pictures? Great for you. Now, that's inside. That's Bill Alexander there on the right, with his hand on his head. The assistant DA. There's quite a few pictures of it. We're looking into what's called room 317, 317. That's where it's all happening. And basically, behind Bill Alexander, where you see the blinds, that's where Fritz's office is. That's where all the real action. There are no photos of Oswald actually sitting inside that, but we've seen some footage where it's basically being let through and going into that room as such. Right. Now, before I kick off and start obliterating you all with a load of names as such, I want to talk about John Reed. Johnny Reed was, this has been written about by Bill Kelly at first, and also by Greg Parker in great detail. And this is about an interrogation technique that basically allows you to lie to a suspect and you have absolutely no comeback whatsoever. Now in Europe, that's been frowned upon, but in America, no problem whatsoever. A copper can go into an interrogation and lie and tell him whatever he wants to say to a suspect and basically can force a false confession. That is the main problem with the Reed technique. Now, I've got 4 slides, so I'm just going to leave them on for about 20 seconds so you can just read what the Reed technique actually consists of. I'm going deeper into this in my paper, but just... Next. This is a technique from the 40s, from the mid-40s, late 40s, and it's been adopted by many police.
Include shining a bright light in their face.
Yeah.
In movies. I don't think I'm going to get a truthful confession after all that.
As far as we're concerned, the RBC, the Reed technique is basically put to use various aspects of it during Oswald's interrogations as such. Right, let's talk BPD. We've got a lot of people here, as you can see. Now, I'm just going to help this to identify a lot of people, because the thing is, because there is so much photography and film material available, I'm basically trying to find out. Now, this is a joint project. I've got to thank actually 2 loan masters for a lot of help regarding this. And that's Dennis Morissette and Steve Rowe. They both have helped me immensely with trying to identify people. And they themselves take great pride in identifying people as such. With the Dallas Police Force especially, they've been a great help. Now, let me just talk about it. First of all, the main head guy, that's Will Fritz. Now, we've got a lot of documentation, I'm not going to pull it all up. But there he is. Now, he's quite a shy man. And also an evil father as well.
Chief Captain Will Fritz has now said that the case of President Kennedy's assassination is now closed with the death of Oswald. Side the Chief Captain Will Fritz.
Oh, let me just run out the background. This is Fritz arriving at the Texas School Book Depository. He came out, it was with Lumpkin, and Lumpkin escorted him onto the steps as such. About an hour later, he was gone again, and he went back to the BPD, where basically, allegedly, they found Oswald sitting there. There's a whole story about how this all come together. The bottom line is that there's quite a bit of lying going on, because, let me get to this, in relation to Will Fritz coming in with Elmer Boyd. That's Elmer Boyd there, carrying the rifle in his right hand, and Fritz is still on the steps. And if you look really close, you can see a bottle of Coke there on the left step, but this is a little bit difficult now. There's the top of the bottle that just sticks out above the step.
Can you point?
Oswald's so-called soda, but it could be Love Ladies as well. But we don't.
Sorry, on the step itself, rather than
Sorry?
On the step, can you sort of?
Yeah, it's on the step. It's basically on the left. You just see a little tip just sticking out, just above that grey area there, that light grey. It's very hard to see, but it is there. Well, anyway, Boyd, Fritz, they made their way to City Hall on the 3rd floor. Now, there's a bit of a discrepancy when it comes to interrogations. When Oswald's basically being brought in, who's actually talking to him? Now, this is a whole story on its own, but I love telling it, so I'm going to kick off with that right away. First of all, he's apparently interviewed by Rose, who's seen here besides behind Buell Wesley Frazier. That's Rose in the Thin Blue Line documentary. If you haven't seen that documentary, I suggest you do. We'll find out about how the Dallas Police works in a later day. Rose is in the middle of that. We'll get back to that in a second. And the second guy who supposedly interviewed him is Richard Stovall. And Stovall with Hank Moore. Stovall on the right, Hank Moore on the left. We'll get back to Hank Moore in a moment. All right? They talk gently for about 10 minutes. They have a talk with him, not a real interrogation. When they ask him his name, they contradict each other. Stovall says he called himself Oswald. Rose says he called himself Heidel. Then they start talking about the billfold, etc., etc. Then apparently Fritz comes in, grabs Oswald, and takes him to his office and starts to talk to him. But then we've got a bit of a problem. Because there's somebody else who claims he interviewed Lee Oswald. And that is Jim Lavelle, second on the left in that shit. Now Jim Lavelle's still alive. He's been concocting a story about basically saying, I interviewed Oswald on ticket only, and then Fritz came in and took him away. He's been on video claiming this 2-3 times. His Warren Commission clearly states, I did not interview Oswald at all. What is known is that Lavelle was present at the last interrogation of Oswald on Sunday. And what even gets worse is that basically Lavelle also says it in his own report. There's absolutely not one word written about Lavelle interviewing Oswald before Fritz picks him up. Lavelle has basically concocted this story and has basically been living with it and basically put it forward as such for about 2-3 decades already, and basically just keeps repeating the same thing over and over. I don't believe Lavelle did that, because the problem is also there are reports that basically show from Lieutenant T.L. Baker, who I'll point out in a moment, who basically states that Stovall and Rose talked to Oswald and then Fritz took over as such. I don't know what Lavelle's point is. Maybe he likes to give himself a few points on things, or maybe he gets paid for it for saying it on TV as such. Who knows? But it's not true. Lavelle's got absolutely bugger all to do with the interrogations from Saturday or Sunday at all as such. Right. I'm going to call up a few more people you can just look at. I write pretty much a lot about all these guys in the paper. There's no point. I've only got 1 hour to talk about it. So this guy with the hat on the left, that's a guy called C.W. Brown. C.W. Brown is everywhere. Here he is in the corridor. This is just after Oswald basically complains about his hygienic rights and wants to have a shower as such. I'll play those videos later on. This is C.W. Brown's Oswald's body in Parkland. This is documentation. Right, then the next one. M.G. Harling. M.G. Harling is somebody who's basically escorting Oswald from the interrogation up to the cell and back and forth, but also towards Linus. M.G. Hall is this guy with the glasses in the center. He's present quite a lot. That's Elmer Boyd on the right. Elmer Boyd was, I think, 60 interrogations he was present, and I think that's all the interrogations Oswald did. Now, what is the funny bit about all these guys when you start reading all their stuff? Is that the second they start talking, asking questions about what did Oswald say regarding his presence, where he was, they don't know. They have no idea. Whether he's innocent or not, well, yeah, he said he was innocent. Some of them say he emphatically denied that he had nothing to do with the shooting as such. Yet, when it comes to the coppers, like Richard Sims, Elmer Boyd, and all the others, and you ask them and say, yo man, what's going on? What did he say? That's Sims on the left. They don't know nothing. They've got collective amnesia. Fritz was good at it, because he just basically, don't know this, that, and the other. But the others are basically just following orders and just say as little as possible. Richard Sims is probably the best one out of all of it. Harold Weisberg wrote a piece on him and basically slaughtered him completely for it. Because he can come up with details, the most minute details about the case, and yet at the same time when he's being asked, when he's actually sitting in that room next to him, because that's the thing, Fritz is talking to him, but they always have the copper or detective actually sitting next to Oswald, so he can't go anywhere whatsoever. And that was either Boyd or Sims inside that room. And yet, they don't know anything. There's a video of Boyd from the 6th floor museum, where it's about a year ago. Boyd is still alive as well, just like Liddell. I think all the others are dead, right? And in that video, he's basically being asked, like, well, what did Oswald say when he was being put to charge and stuff like that? And he just, his mannerisms and everything. He can't commit himself to actually saying, that's what he said, or this and that. Instead of that, he just freaks out and makes a funny body movement with his face, and that's that. Sims and Boyd are pretty much like they've got amnesia. Right, Gerald Hill. Gerald Hill wasn't really part of the investigation as such, but what's really important for me regarding Hill, pictures show up. This is Hill in front of the Texas School Book Depository. He runs for about 10 feet. I'm not kidding. You see the footage. He gets out of the car, he runs for 10 feet, and then he slows down. I'm thinking, yeah, what are you running for? Police station is a stone throw away. You already coming by a car. So the whole thing is a show-off. He's then later on seen at the 6th floor, shouting outside the window, telling him to come up and so forth. Then he gets in the car, makes his way to the Tippett scene, hunting for the killer of Tippett. There's footage of him where he's got his jacket off and he just tries to run in his house where they went through a false lead. And then he basically is part of the team that works towards the Texas Theater. Then he makes his way back with Oswald in the car and drives back to City Hall as such. And what did he say? Twice, in 2 occasions, he doesn't make a mention of Heidel ID whatsoever while he's talking to the press. And the other thing is that he basically says that Oswald wanted a lawyer from the word get-go. I'll get back to that in part 2, but just like one of the people that he basically already spoke to at the very beginning to basically claim that he wanted a lawyer. Hill was later on seen as well by getting the gun out and pulling the bullets in his hand as such. Yeah, basically meaning like it was recharged, you know, even though the shells were thrown out. There were 6 bullets in that gun. Whether that gun is Oswald's gun is a whole other matter, because in Gus Rose's interview, he did an interview in 2008, if I'm not mistaken, and he basically said that Oswald told him that they tossed the gun at him. But he's the only voice that actually has been saying this as such. Yeah. That's Hill. Goodbye. Right. Then we've got Glenn King, Captain. I'm going to get back deeper into him in the second half, because King is basically being used to deflect with regards to Oswald's legal representation as such. He's a man who looks really correct and honourable and, you know, this, that, and the other, but I've got a different opinion of him. King as well, inside the office, as you can see, standing there, the door opening, and he was interviewed. And here is King at the very end of the press conference, when Oswald's already being pulled out, and basically the camera just swerves to the right, and there's King standing. It's quite funny when you start to find these people's identities, and all of a sudden you see a bit of footage and you go, that's him standing over there. That allows you to put it into a rough time frame as such. Right, Hank Moore. Hank Moore is more famous for just escorting. There he is on the left. of escorting Oswald, and when you see the video later on of where he basically claims that he's a patsy, and where Oswald claims he's a patsy, Hank Moore's more or less shooting. The shadow drops on Oswald as such. Right, what else have we got? Elmer coming in. That's from Larry Sneed's book. He pretty much spoiled what Fritz was doing. The thing with the way Fritz worked in interrogations and such, and you can condemn this, but it's the way it was, and that's the way it was done. There were no notes taken. Notes were made afterwards. You would just sit there, talk one-on-one, not make any notes, and then basically go out and then start writing your notes up. So, you know, you can write whatever you want. This is another thing with the read technique. You just basically put your own story forward. It doesn't matter. There are no recordings. At that time, no interrogations was ever recorded at that time. So a lot of people with 50 year hindsight like, it should have been recorded. What should have been done is Fritz should have gone out in the corridor and borrowed equipment, because he couldn't buy it, because twice apparently he tried to put a request forward and he wasn't given it as such. Yeah, think about that or whatever you want, but notes were taken during those sessions. That Oswald says that as well on the 24th. He basically, in Harry Dean Holmes's the postal inspector evidence, basically a transcript comes forward that notes were taken. So who took those notes? Well, Fritz, apparently, I'm not going to go deep into this because I already discussed these notes in the second floor lunchroom, Harry. Alright, here we go. Now, these are the scribbled notes, and these scribbled notes only came, it's one page, came forward during the ARRB in the end of, yes, 96 or 97. 97, thank you, Norman. And it came out just in about November, just for the 8th anniversary. So those notes were basically hidden 34 years, 35 years. So, that of course is an issue. How and what, nobody knows. Anonymous donor gave them. Fritz himself died in the 80s, I think it was 84 if I'm not mistaken. So it took another 13 years for those notes from, you pulled off Fritz's corpse and basically put them out into the general domain as such. A lot can be said about them. First of all, they're not contemporary. That's one thing, because he talks about the deceased. And there's a couple other hints, can't tell you right now, that basically point to the fact that those notes were basically made after. Sean Murphy and a few others think that Fritz copied Jim Bookhouse notes. It's possible. There are a few bits that overlap as such, but you know, it's guesswork. The bottom line is that what they also say, where he was at the time, and so forth. Now, the bottom line is that he always said, no one can contest it because everybody else has been saying it, is the fact that he said it was on the first floor. It was nowhere else. From 12 o'clock, he was on the first floor. He was in the lunch, he had his lunch, and that's when things get really mixed up. Blowing out the stink, he was upstairs on the 6th floor, and conspiracy theorists say he had his lunch, and then after the shooting, he went up through the front stairs, and he went into the lunchroom, and that's where he got encountered by Baker. No. Because, let me just tell you that, we are going to FBI, and we're going to Bookhouse. It's another massive file. And I think it's this one. This is the second one. This is when Oswald's dead. But the hammer. Oswald stated that he went to lunch at approximately noon and he claimed he ate his lunch on the first floor in the lunchroom. However, he went to the second floor where the Coca-Cola machine was located and obtained a bottle of Coca-Cola for his lunch. Oswald claimed to be, this is the second page of this thing. The first page, this is the joint report. This is the joint report where basically Hosty and Bookout are part of. Hosty's only part of this document. Other than that, he has absolutely there's no scriptures with regards to the interrogations from Hosty as such. In that first report, basically says he got it for his lunch. Not after his lunch, he got it for his lunch. So he went to the second floor, lunchroom, before he got his lunch and actually sat down in the lunchroom downstairs in the domino room. But a month ago, I saw one of the witnesses and make catastrophic mistakes with regards to the lunchroom as such, basically claimed that she saw Oswald sitting in the second floor lunchroom. I find that really odd because the domino room downstairs on the first floor was basically the domain of all the manual labels as such. The issue with the documentation of Hosty and Bookhout is that Bookhout contradicts his second report, which was written on the 24th, or after Oswald was there, basically contradicts the joint report of Oswald's movement after 12 o'clock as such. You'll have to look into it. There's about 3 items of discrepancy. One of them is basically that he says that Oswald went for lunch and talking after the assassination as such. This is the problem with the documentation. None of it actually backs the first statement up. The second statement is always rubbish. It is utter rubbish, contradicting and massaging the story as such to basically get the thing going. Right. Now, of the FBI, this is Dad. This book out when he was younger. Very strong features, eyebrows. And then 6 months ago, we managed to, this is more Dennis Morissette's work. I got this picture from Nara, it's from a contact sheet. These are pictures by a guy called Jim Murray, who worked for Black Star, shooting book for Black Star. And we had all these contact sheets really scanned in at high res, I think 600 dpi. And I've enlarged it even more. So I had this picture, and I didn't think much of it. And then all of a sudden, Steve Rowe found a picture of Bookhout standing in a newspaper article. Let's see if I can dig that out. There it is. I think this article is from '61. And Manning Clemens, who's right next to it in the middle, and you see Bookhout on the right. And that's when we basically, when Dennis saw this article from Steve Rowe, he said, "You've got a picture of Bookhout." And we've been proven to be elusive for a long, long time. We couldn't figure it out who it was, and that's Bookhout. And it was kind of cool that we managed to recognize this guy as such. All right, Hosty. Hosty is about, I don't know, probably the biggest clusterfuck of the whole case.
Yes.
I'm not kidding. He fucked so much shit up, it's not even funny anymore. Here's the first thing. He walks into the garage, and Jack Ravel has just gotten back as well. And they get out of the car. And Hosty says 2 things about it. Oswald, communist, on top of that, according to a report, that he was also capable of doing so. Now, this kicks off a massive thing inside the DPD and the FBI. As a matter of fact, it took the whole day. It's a whole story on its own, but I'll try and keep it short and sweet. The bottom line is that Hosty tells Jack Ravel. Jack Ravel is a captain of the Criminal Intelligence Division. So they're the cops that spy on you. Like, you're subversive, you're going to get a visit from Jack Ravel and his boys. Now, he has the story. He hears the story from Hosty, and he goes to Gannaway. Gannaway is a captain. And Gannaway says to Ravel, write a document. So he writes this document, and that puts it at the FBI deep in the shit, because all of a sudden the press knows about it, everything. Blah, 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 blah. Oswald, communist, this, that, and the other. This is another reason why Oswald just got the chop real quick. Because within an hour, it is known that Oswald was a commie going to Russia, right, for 3 years, etc., etc., etc. Communist in Dallas in the 60s, I don't know. It's not a good idea to be like somebody like that. So any credit he did have, besides the fact that he's a cop killer as well, is basically sorted as such. Hosty basically gets in deep, deep shit because of it. He's basically reprimanded twice, and he's been sent off, going to Kansas, I think Kansas City, and he gets docked on his pay and so forth. And Hoover basically calls down Shanklin, and Shanklin calls Curry, and they say, we want a retraction. of what you just said. Because basically, it's no different than saying, well, the plane slammed into the building, and the CIA knew about it because they were training the pilots as such, blah, blah, blah. And that news basically comes out about an hour after the actual hit. So that's incredibly quick. So Hoover basically musters his troops and makes sure that Curry gives a retraction and such. Curry himself, bit of a mess, because, where is it?
Bottom right.
Yeah, thank you. There's our man.
Yeah.
He talked a lot to the press. He did another thing which I'm going to talk about in my next talk in about a couple of years when I talk about the Texas School Book Repository. And he basically gave Molina's name away as well, straight during the press conference on the in the corridor as such. Molina lost his job because of that. The Texas School Book Repository got loads of calls. That's Mike Payne.
This investigation has been carried on jointly by the FBI, the Secret Service, the Rangers, and the Dallas Police.
The guy with the gray hat in the middle was Vincent Drain, the FBI. Stuck like flies on shit on the top boys. He was with Wade and he was with Curry at all times. Didn't do anything through Fritz. Knew better than that because Fritz had his own fiefdom. Now, Fritz had been running the show for himself for almost 30 years. Did whatever he liked. So if they would say, like, you want the rifle, we want this, and that, he'd say, forget about it, get out of my office. So he was quicker, basically, by going through Curry and Wade. And on the right, underneath 317 on the door, that's David Johnston. David Johnston is the Justice of the Peace. He allegedly arraigned Oswald twice. I'll get back to that later, but just for recognition later on, you find out as such.
This department, Captain Fritz has been in charge. Charges of murder have been accepted against him. Are you going to bring him out?
This bit is basically roughly 8, 9 o'clock in the evening. Oswald's been charged with murder of Tippett. And now the press, I'll get back to this later, but the press basically harangues them and says, we're going to bring him out. And this is what basically results into the press conference, basically. That's how it's just basically been organized. They just stand there, the reporters are just going, can you bring him out? Can you do this? Blah, blah, blah. And later on, a couple hours later.
Can we get a room where you get a picture of him? Can we get a press conference where he can stand against the wall and not so?
No.
Okay.
Let's go get in a larger room here. That's what we're talking about here. Let's go down there with it.
That's that. That's how it's just done. You know, nothing official, blah, blah. It's just a little flag on the corridor. Boom. There you go. You've got the press conference lined up. I'll get back to that later. Right. Now, let's talk about another cool story. Roger Craig. I'll tell you what, I believe Craig. You all know about Roger Craig?
Yeah.
Who doesn't? Okay, cool. Now, Roger Craig made some statements, and a lot of people have been hammering about Roger Craig, whether he can be trusted, whether blah, blah, blah. Well, there's two things that I found out this week. That's Craig and Penn Jones. Craig on the left. I don't know who the one is in the center. Come on, load up. And of course, Bill Decker. They both were the sheriffs. Well, Bill Decker was the head honcho. Bill Decker was outside a lot, outside the TSBD and in front of City Hall as well. Decker is the guy with the glasses in the center. Decker was a kind of guy that had made out of the same caliber as Bill Fritz was. Quiet, did it his way, nobody messed with it. And on top of that, he's the one who got Bonnie and Clyde shot the pieces as well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the 30s. It was, you know, that was his reputation, right? The guy who caught Bonnie and Clyde. So, he turned into mincemeat. There's Decker outside again, with the glasses. He had quite a reputation. This is in his office. I really like those pictures on the background. Now, Roger Craig was one of those sheriffs. He was one of the most promising sheriffs around until he got involved in this stuff. Now, the reason why I believe Roger Craig is really simple. This is the front page of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. This is the morning edition of the 23rd. Now, I know books are a great resource, but I think newspapers sometimes are even better because it puts it right into context. What was said and when was it coming out? So, on the morning of the 23rd, this is what's being said. Craig told the Star-Telegram he saw the man come down the street near the west end of the building, near the back door. He seemed like he was in a hurry. I tried to get over there, but couldn't because of the traffic, Craig said. We ran out to the curb and whistled down a white Nash Rambler driven by a Negro. In the book cover-up, Gary Shaw, in there was about 3 or 4 pages basically spent on this. A picture of Craig standing in Elm Street and a white Nash Rambler in the back as such. Well, that lines up. There are 3 or 4 other witnesses on Elm Street, around Dealey Plaza, that saw a similar situation as such as well. The other bit is, the two sped away in the direction of the turnpike, Craig said. Craig came to police headquarters later in the afternoon and identified Oswald. There's no doubt in my mind, he's the one I saw over there, he said. Craig viewed the suspect in the office of Detective Captain Fritz. Now, this then gets brought up by the Warren Commission. And Fritz starts to go, came over, some guy came over, like pretending like I barely know this guy. And they've been working together for 3 or 4 years already, as such. He was in the 6th floor, on the 6th floor, with Fritz when the weapon was found as well. So for him to pretend, barely know him as such, he's full of it. And I find this story, of course, was taken on the 22nd, on the day itself. And he says, I went into his office and I basically confronted Oswald with Fritz as such. I believe that bit of the story, definitely. But I also believe the fact that he basically saw Oswald leave from the depository as such, since he recognized him again, back into the interrogations. There's a heavy pointer that Oswald left between 10 and 15 minutes after the assassination, instead of the so-called 3 minutes. I still haven't figured it out. In 3 minutes, he guzzles down like coke as well. So. Right. That's my bit on the Roger Craig. But there's one tiny bit, and this is what I discovered this week. See that guy on the right? Well, this is a picture from Jesse Curry's book, apparently. My copy doesn't have this picture in it. I don't know why. But this picture is also in cover-up. Craig basically claims, after that book came out, he said, I'm the guy on the right. It's not. Now, at first, let me see, right, this is the other picture. Yeah. You can see already from the facial structure that those two don't really rhyme. But the guy on the right, I thought, was Charles Kunkel. And Charles Kunkel is a Secret Service agent. Now, Vince Palomar says I'm wrong because he said Kunkel didn't appear. In Dallas at that time, Kunkel was mostly responsible with Mike Howard for Marina Oswald's protection. About a day after the assassination, they basically swept in and took him from reporters and basically kept her incommunicado and on top of that hidden away from everyone else as such. That's where people they got involved. But I've got a document that basically says a list of Secret Service agents and FBI agents who were actually involved in the interrogations or were present as such. So I'm not really 100% sure yet. I've got several pictures of this guy. I'm just have it? No, not on here. Where basically he is seen inside 317. And because of that, it can't be Roger Craig, because this guy is over a 2-day period in that room, and Craig has loads of other stuff to do. It's no big deal that he basically mis-ID'd himself. You know, I believe that newspaper article for me is a bit of a singer showing that he was right, he was talking the truth and such. And also, this so-called discovery wasn't by Craig wasn't done until the late 60s as such. And if you read Craig's material, things were rather downhill with attempts on his life and being pulled over as such. Barry Ernest writes a really good piece about it because he visits him for 3 hours, talks to him for 3 hours, and then after that they get pulled over by the cops as such. So he was basically harassed all the time by the cops. Right, Manning Clemens. Manning Clemens did nothing special with the interrogations. The only heavy questions. Second on the left. What he did was, what were you saying in Russia? What were you doing in Russia? You have kids, you have a wife, what is their name? What do you do? This, that, and the other. All the so-called mundane stuff, like when you fill in the form, that's what Manning Clemens did. He got interrupted twice, one for a lineup. I don't know what the second reason was, but it was there. Right, I already told you about Drain. There's Drain on the right. That's Drain behind Henry Wade during the press conference. The guy on the left of Drain, with the glasses, shorter, that's James Allen. He's a buddy of Fritz. He was an assistant DA as well. Major, hardcore, conservative nutcase. Alright? Hardcore. Became a judge afterwards as well. Gave defense lawyers an absolutely hard time. So this is another thing. When you start reading about these people, Allen, Alexander, it's all conservative, it's all, you know, it comes from an environment that's pretty right-wing, and, you know, the second you are a suspect, you're fucked, basically, with these guys. And the guy on the left, that's David Johnston again as well. I have some video of him later. Right. Secret Service. Now, our main guy, Secret Service, or actually two. First one's Forrest Sorrells. They say that this is Sorrells in the hat, with the hat and the glasses. I don't believe so, because of the timing. This is definitely Sorrells. That's definitely Sorrells. Now, you gave me some really good documentation on Sorrells. Preliminary interview for the Warren Commission, and also documentation on what's the guy called? Who wrote that book for Jackie Kennedy?
Manchester.
Yeah, William Manchester, that's it. And the interview notes of that as well. And in that, Sorrells gives quite a bit of information regarding the actual interrogations. Whereas for years, there was very little to find on him because, and if I can just find this damn document. I can't. No. Well, it's here on the left, blended in. This document was found by Larry Harpanen, and the bottom half of that document is about Ruby, but the top half is about Oswald. And it was just hidden in the Warren report. And it also indicates that there probably was another page in front of that so-called interrogation, but that's missing. Because this page was inside Ruby's section. So it was just coincident that they found it. He actually says more in those two interviews that are of interest. And what's really interesting is that he slags James Hosty off like there's no tomorrow. Calls him an amateur, an idiot, whatever. People just basically mess stuff up to such an extent that basically they don't think he's very good at what he's doing as such. Very interesting. Now, Kelly. Thomas Kelly is the guy here on the bottom right. He looks like a Cape Crusader. Oh, it says Kelly. Looks like a Batman style picture. All right, Kelly. Kelly we see often in, as you see, here's the scrum, and there's Thomas Kelly on the left in the hat. You know, this is all work from the last year or two. Is this the same shot? No. Kelly's there as well. You can see Kelly, right in front of him is Curry. To the left there with a grin against the wall, that's Dave Grant. He's a Secret Service. That's Graves. That's T.L. Baker with the crew cut, looking back. That's the Damsick, John Damsick on the left. M.G. Hall with the glasses. Sims behind him. I don't know who that's on the right. And that's probably Boyd on the right there. But the Secret Service were closely following what the DPD actually were taking them into. Now, Kelly's report, again, I'm talking about this at the second floor essay paper a lot more. Kelly basically puts a few claims forward which are really hard to swallow. And basically, he said when he was standing in front of the textbook building and about to leave it, a young crew cut man rushed up to him and said he was from the Secret Service, showed a book of identification and asked him where the phone was. Oswald said he pointed toward the payphone in the building and that he saw the man actually go to the phone before he left. This is in relation, possibly, to, what's the guy's name? The reporter who went actually in there. And apparently he switches the ID of basically thinking he was a Secret Service agent. There were apparently no Secret Service agents in Dealey Plaza at that time. They were all following with JFK in the motorcade going towards Parkland at that time. So, but that's not the only time someone waved a Secret Service badge at a person and said, I'm with the Secret Service. So we know about behind the stockade fence as well, somebody showed a Secret Service badge. And we also know that people around the Texas School Depository, when there was no one around, showed Secret Service badges as such. Then there's another thing, and this thing is even harder to swallow, and I really hope I can find it. I think it is. He said he ate his lunch with the colored boys who worked with him. He described one of them as Junior, the colored boy, and the other one was a short little Negro boy. He said his lunch consisted of cheese, bread, fruit, and apples, and was the only package he had with him when he went to work. The short little Negro is probably James John. And, no, that's Junior, James Junior John. And the other one is probably Harold Norman. He was short as well. So, but it's not 100% sure. And then the last bit with Kelly, I hope I did this right, no, of course not. Wrong. I'm going to move on soon. It's basically about Oswald's presence when the motorcade came by. He's the only one of all the people that basically states that Oswald wasn't there. But he said, I didn't see the motorcade go past. With all the other statements, it's obvious that Oswald said he was on the first floor and he was looking at the motorcade. But Kelly is doing a really good job of trying to disavow that. Now, William Patterson is kind of cool. I only found out this week. That's William Patterson. William Patterson wrote a report on the 25th of November and basically said he stood outside the office and in the corridor and talking to Jim Hosty. And Jim Hosty tells him and says, and I quote, he says, Oswald saw two subversives 2 weeks before the assassination as such. That's what Hosty says in the corridor to this particular Secret Service agent. This whole thing comes out, being yacked about, well, of course it's covered up, no one talks about it. And then Hosty, who's actually grilled to quite an extent during the HSCA hearings. There's reports, there are about 150, 120 pages, there's 2 or 3 interviews, and they're all quite long. And in that, basically, he excuses the whole thing and just says, like, no, that's not it, it's about such and such an event where we had somebody else coming in. He's covering up. And that's just what Hosty's been doing for a long time. His book, as well as Simon Oswald, if I were you, I wouldn't bother to read it because it's just one massive apology and excuse for whatever's done and whatever's been done to him and so forth. He's not to blame, this, that, and the other, blah, blah. And of course, to an extent, he's part of a massive machinery where he basically sticks his neck out only for about half an inch and basically gets slapped down for it as such. So it's understandable, but at the same time, also, they're looking for a scapegoat and they may host the scapegoat internally, big time. So. This then basically, I'm still investigating about what Patterson is working on, and the same goes for another guy who I don't have mentioned in here. And these two Secret Service agents, overall, there is very little of the Secret Service what they're actually talking about. Mike Howard is probably about the biggest disinfo clown you can find in this whole case. Okay, the guy lies and puts it forward like, I don't know, he's a poster boy for the Warren Commission. That's what he definitely is, Mike Howard these days. That's Mike Howard on the left. And that's Mike Howard with Marina and Marguerite. He's wearing the shades. How much time have I got left?
10 minutes, bro.
Okay, cool. Right. Screw the Secret Service. Let's talk Harry Dean Holmes. Harry Dean Holmes is a postal inspector. The reason why he basically got into the picture was because of that bullshit with the rifle and that order and God knows what. That's another humongous lie, unbelievable. But basically Holmes comes in. Now Holmes makes it sound like he is the guy. He's the guy who can remember everything. You don't need notes, but he did take notes. But he basically says, he does it all from memory. Everything I've been doing from memory. I go into court, I talk from memory. Think about it, going into court. And somebody just comes in there and basically says, yeah, I remember him saying such and such. It's hearsay, it's just unbelievable. And yeah, it's going to be taken for gospel research. Holmes makes his way on Sunday into the offices of Lord Fritz. He indicates it that he's been there on Friday and Saturday as well, but there's no real proof of that. And the funny thing is that Will Fritz, no less, invites him to come into his office for the interrogation. Yet all the complaining and all the bitching about outside interference of the FBI, the Secret Service, and so forth. If the captain had him alone, he would have cracked him, he would have broken Oswald, he would have confessed, blah, 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 etc., etc. And he basically does the contradictory move, brings in Holmes as such. Because the weapon and the rifle and the postal stuff, etc., were already discussed on the 23rd, on the day before, as such. But Holmes breaks rank. Holmes breaks rank with the fact that the Dallas police and the Secret Service, they keep their lips tight together. They don't really talk about it as such. Not even during the Warren Commission testimony. They try to deflect or just pretend I have no recollection. Right? That's another phrase. I don't recall. I don't have no recollection of that. That phrase is being repeated many, many times. But Holmes doesn't. Holmes basically gives the game away and basically points out, and this is what I do in my second floor lunchroom paper, Holmes basically shows that Oswald was encountered on the first floor just before going outside. And there are various indicators of it, why it is on the first floor, and it is only because Holmes just didn't keep his mouth shut. He actually just screws it up for the DPD if you really look close into his testimony as such. I know that Gerald Posner has an interview, I can't get it, I asked him 3-4 times, he doesn't want to give it to me. There's an interview of Holmes from the 80s by another postal inspector, and he refers to it in case close, but I can't get hold of it. If anyone has it, send it to me. Okay, then of course we've got the agencies I mentioned, and then of course there's smaller agencies. The Texas Rangers, the ATF, who weren't called ATF at that time. U.S. Marshals and Highway Patrol. U.S. Marshals, I only know from the records that they had a guy called Robert Nash. And Robert Nash was there on the 23rd, and possibly on the 24th, I'm not 100% sure. But I don't have any records yet. So that would be interesting to look into. Then the Highway Patrol, well, they're here in uniform. There's our Kunkel guy, right there in the middle, the guy who basically people thought was Roger Craig, underneath the O and the B. So we've got Highway Patrol, there's FM Turner on the phone, that's T.L. Baker, there's Damsick on the right, Johnston kicking his ear, and our Kunkel candidate, not Craig. now, the most interesting one out of the whole bunch is the ATF. Now, Dick Russell wrote about a guy called Frank Ellsworth. This is a really interesting story. And Ellsworth is on the cover on an arms deal. Guy involved, John Thomas Mason. Now, when we had Gilnick's Jackson talk a month ago, basically, she said, he's still alive. And I'm too scared to go to him, but he's still alive. Frank Ellsworth is an ATF agent and also an FBI source, which came out in the documents released last year, that he was an FBI informant. And Ellsworth basically claims that he is inside the Texas School Depository, which is true because he was backed up by a report. But at the same time, he claims he's in there right away from the word get-go. Will Fritz gets him in and goes, come on, which couldn't be further removed from the truth because Fritz walked like an old man up those steps into the Texas School Book Depository as such. There's no sign of him, anyone motioning anyone to come with him whatsoever. Ellsworth is inside the Texas School Book Depository and then makes his way into the interrogation room. And he thinks he made a massive screw-up. And the screw-up is basically the size of John Thomas Marson. Because he says, John Thomas Marson, and I don't have a good picture of him, I've got a picture of him, but I don't even know it's him. He says it's a dead ringer for Oswald. So Ellsworth walks into the interrogation room and all of a sudden thinks, my God, I let this guy escape on this arms deal just less than 2 days before.
Oh.
And he's sitting there and he's the possible shooter of the president as such. So that's by itself quite an interesting story. And you start digging into Marson, and of course we're talking Burgess and all that malarkey. And it's an interesting side story. He thickens the story itself up a little bit. I was in there, I did this, I did that. But there is no documentation of Ellsworth basically being inside that interrogation room as such. But it's quite a funny story, strange story. Right. I am going to talk. I'm going to take some questions actually. I'm sick of talking. Does anyone have a question? Yes.
Did you get to listen to the ARRB interview with Husty?
No.
That's out.
Yeah?
That's there. It's hours and hours long. And there are 5 minutes totally redacted.
Oh yeah, otherwise.
For reasons of national security.
Really?
So that's kind of interesting. That's out there, that's on the shelves. When you go there, you must go to audio and listen to it, I think.
I've got somebody going who's trying to capture audio in June, so
So that's in RG 541, that's in the review board collection. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there.
Cool.
And there must be transcripts somewhere. You know, I don't know where they are. I haven't found those transcripts. But
Right.
some transcripts.
Well, overall, the documentation, when you look at it, is basically that Oswald got a shafting. That whatever he said, when it comes to denials, swept under the carpet there and then. When he basically points out that he saw Junior and Jarman and Norman pick up their lunch as such on the first floor into the domino room, that doesn't really get investigated. You sent me a document from the FBI in Hoover early December and basically finds out about this, and it says handle promptly, basically to investigate what's actually the matter with this, about this statement as such. And there's sadly no other documentation available, so that's just one sheet that basically Hoover says, why investigate, but there's of course no follow-up documentation, so it's just another question on top of another question. So anyway, that's my first part.
Well done, boy.